Okay, let's continue working with some of the tools here. And we are still working on the drawing. At this moment, I have this same drawing in 4 frames, and I'm not going to pay attention to the length of the video just yet, or the length of the frames just yet. I'm going to spend more time on the tools themselves. So we created the tools or the drawing with using the brush tool, but we can also go back here to the select tool. I can select, of course, by default. And if I have under my tool properties, I have my lasso or my key. If I have lasso, whatever is selected, that will select my object right now. I am in the color art, so it's selecting the color only. If I go to the line art, I can select the line art for the outline of my character. If I go and say select by color, if I select this, here, you select that. I can select all of the objects that are under the same color, which is great because that allows me to manipulate and do some of that. I can also use the cutter. To use the cutter, let me just show you one extra little thing there, and that is that if I do the cutter, let me use my blue line and I create a line like that. So if I use the cutter, I can now go with the cutter and select the object that, let's see if I can um, select that one, the rest, and then I just delete that, and then I do that one here, and then stroke it, and then get rid of it. So it allows me to control my my edges, so that I don't have to be worrying about erasing things. The cutter also has some other attributes that you can play with here. For example, that one was for a single line. You can also draw several lines. You can also go and work individually, cutting individual lines, and so on and so forth. I'm going to keep it simple for now with this with the cutter there. Now I'm going to go back here to select, and I'm going to go on the second one. And the second one actually have the contour editor. And the contour editor allows me to select, and you see that when you select the line, I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard here to go closer. So that allows me to um, grab the line and modify my object, or even just select some lines and maybe you know um, move them or edit the curve the best I can to make them look a bit better, right? A bit smoother if I need to. So that helps me with some organize there. I'm actually reducing some of those lines by moving them here. Anyways, you can go and do a little bit of editing there, and I click by accident here on my keyboard on my pen. All right, so that allowed me to do the contour editor of my lines. I moved it here. I can move that by just simply grabbing. If I grab the line, I can just move it and modify some of the line thickness, which is pretty neat. I also have a center line, which allows me to move the center of the object, which is pretty cool because I can start making some little variations to the object itself, so I can get it to look slightly differently, right? And I also have the pencil editor for in the case of pencil. I can go modify. I don't have any pencil drawings here, so I cannot do much with the pencil editor. I have the smooth editor, and the smooth editor has something pretty interesting, and it is that you can use it by brushing or by using the marquee. It seems like giving me a better effect with the marquee or the lasso than with the brush. When you do the brush, I don't see it working doing much. But I've seen it working with the marquee. So if I do the marquee, you see the marquee, get rid of the extra points that you may have, and it helps softening some of the extra points that you made. It gives me. I can also do it with a lasso. So it helps with reducing the amount of extra detail in cases like say for example if I have something that is very sophisticated. Yeah, I'm going to just make a shape, right, a random shape, um, and then I go into my smooth editor and I can just start reducing points. It comes to a point that you don't have a lot much more a lot more to change, but eventually I select it, and it's really not perspective per se. What it is that it is it distorts the object, so allows you to have the formation on the object, which is pretty convenient. Right now, I'm working with that. If I click on this thing here, let's see if it lets me modify the object. Oh, actually, so one's doing it under for the layers that are underneath of it. So that's not it. And this one is perspective or lattice, so it allows me to modify perspective, modify lattice, which is allowing me to just the format is pretty close to each other. I actually not see a much difference there. Um, there is also the envelope, and the envelope allows you to deform the object in a very uh, organic way, just like the way you do it in Photoshop. Makes it pretty efficient. There are other things in all of the tools that I've been missing is that you can flip objects, you can rotate the object, whatever modifications you may need to do to it, you can do that, and allowing you to improve that. There is the edit gradient tool, and what that is if you look at the colors, I have a gradient that I created here. Let me create a new gradient so we can see what that is. So I'm gonna create a new color. I'm actually that's in the color art. So I'm gonna create a new color. And I'm gonna just name it gradient one, and then I'm just gonna go double click on it. And then here I'm gonna say to use a gradient, and a gradient I'm going to use from light blue to an intense blue. I'm gonna close that, and that's my gradient. That one's a linear gradient. Actually, let me just double click on it. I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna make it radial. Actually, I'm going to flip it so that it is more like that. And I'm going just to just close it there. So now, if I come and apply for the gradient with my bucket, my object there gets wherever I drop the bucket, the highlight of the gradient is applied, which is pretty cool because it starts giving an effect of volume. But now going back to what I was saying before, the edit gradient tool allows me to click on the gradient that is on the inside of that object, and I can start modifying the gradient so that I can zoom out a tiny bit with my one key on my keyboard, so I can modify and reposition my gradient based on my needs. So that makes it a lot cooler, and makes it pretty flexible, so that my objects start looking a bit better. All right, so that is that. Let me move on. Of course, we have the pencil. Oh, we have this one here, which is the brush we already used, but we have the stencil brush. And then the stencil brush is pretty cool because it allows me to go back to my line art here. It's pretty cool because if let's say I use this one and I have an object that is already there, I can start painting inside of that object, and you start seeing the color that is painted inside of the object. You see how it's kind of applying the same gradient, so you can do pretty interesting things. If you look at the tool properties for that, actually, yeah, there are some little extra here that you can overlay, or you can repaint the brush. So you can overlay, meaning is applied on top of what is already there. So that gives me some kind of interesting visuals. and then just adding a little bit extra there. Okay, so that makes it pretty neat. When I go back here, this is the pencil that we already said. This one is the stamper, and the stamper. Let me go back here. The stamper is you see that right away mine picked up those trees. So you can pick anything you want to do, and of course depending on the settings of the object, this maximum scale, it kind of randomly changes in scale, so that makes it pretty interesting. You can pick anything that you want to, have there. You can create your own drawing, and if you create your own drawing, of course, you can go here, and I can say import, and I could go and look for an image that I created in another program, and I can bring it like you want to do like trees, or you want to do background images. Of course, in this case, it's looking for a window. It's going to pop on the window. I don't have an image for it to bring in, but that allows me to do that. Um, you can also export them, and this is the way to look at them, small or large, doesn't matter. Um, and or you can delete, of course, some of those. If you are, let's say here, you have those two. I'm going to make it big here, and if I'm there and I just simply go here and click plus, that creates a new stamper. I'm gonna call it stamp test here. Just okay. And what that does is just makes a stamper of what I have on the screen. So the stamper, I can click on the object as many times as I want. And of course, that makes a new image. So for creating backdrops and stuff, the cool thing about it is that if I want to select things, these objects are all um, vector files that you can go back and, of course, modify if you need to modify one of them. Let me see if I can do it here. Oh, my computer is kind of having a hard time with it. All right, I'm gonna let it think for a moment. Oh, there it is. So you can modify things. I went a little too fast with it. I'm gonna let it think for a moment. Okay, moving on. Other things. Of course, you have a type tool. We're not going to use type much, so you can pretty much use for titles. We have a tool for creating, of course, sort of primitive rectangles, ellipses, lines, or polygonal lines, which is allows you to create. Right now the lines is of course using my last. Color palette, so that's why it's doing that. Um, and oh, I deleted my color by accident. Let's see, click on this one, delete that, and then of course ellipse or rectangles depending on what you need. That works just fine. Now, here there's another one that is pretty cool, and it is that under, of course, paint we already have to use that, and this one is ink for allowing us to apply certain colors to the lines. So in this case, this is a line, so you can have ink. I cannot apply it to the brushes because the brushes are using elements. This is applied to lines that are made with either the pencil or with these squares or circles, so we can ink those. So let's say if you want to change the colors of your artboard or your character or whatever, you can go and change that. There are some other things we can paint on painted objects. I don't have on painted objects here. Actually, I have this one only, but whatever is not, that one is on painted, so that allows me to paint inside of it. Of course, I could change the color and paint in there. So it allows me to use unpainted objects, and this can be, of course, on paint, so I can